Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily show about everything that matters, with the world's leading commentators and thinkers. Hello everybody, we are still at the DLD conference where everyone knows we're on the brink of something big. The old system doesn't work anymore, but no one quite knows what lies in the future. One man I've always trusted to think in a very creative way about the future is my friend Jan Schultze, a venture capitalist and a man who is committing more and more of his time towards regenerative agriculture and the promise of regeneration. In fact, Jan and I did a video series a couple of years ago on regenerative agriculture. Jan is someone who comes every year to DLD. Jan, is the idea, the promise of not just of regenerative agriculture, but the idea of regeneration more broadly, is that the next big thing?
For me, it definitely is. I think our current system is pretty much in an existential crisis. And I think this has very much to do with an economic system that just has too heavily extracted our natural system and has to do a lot with many people in our today's world being really not very connected anymore with what carries us, which is the natural system. And I mean, when I started off looking at regenerative agriculture and then moving from there on understanding what we have to think about in terms of how the economy future works, it became for me more and more clear that this planet is a living organism. We know since Lovelock that the planet and its atmosphere is basically regulating itself, the climate, the fertility, and so on and so forth. And we humans have heavily interacted with this system and not very much in a steward-like way. There was an interesting presentation today by a native Indian from the United States who was explaining how successfully the native Indians were in terms of stewarding the nature in North America. And I was really very impressed by a presentation. And I think we went into a system where we felt that we know better, and the results we are facing now more and more. And while the world is kind of seems to go away from climate, if you talk about climate change, people can't hear it anymore. If you talk about some of these issues, many people are kind of shutting down. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they, in their inside, they actually strongly feel that something is wrong, and they're longing for something that is more in tune with what they feel is needed, but it's not yet happening. And while at the same time, I see a lot of activities in this space, regardless of if governments are turning back the dial or not. And so I think the big question that is kind of needs to be answered or will be answered, I'm sure it will be answered, is are we human beings with all our technology, and will technology be the big solution, or is the solution to be found somewhere else? And I strongly believe the solution is actually in realigning with Mother Nature, how I call it, and technology will assist us with that if it is used in the appropriate way. And that's, I think, where that's the stuff that I'm really interested in, and that's why I'm involved in several activities in the space of regenerative agriculture and transformation.
You're the founder of the Regenerate Forum,
yes,
which you and I worked on the shows on regenerative agriculture.
Yes.
So you're suggesting, Jan, that the real crisis is a spiritual one. It's not a technological one or even an economic one, that they are consequences of this crisis. But ultimately, it's a human crisis.
It's a human crisis. And it's a crisis of separation, of disconnection, and I think, we have separated to such extreme that we're now, more and more people are realizing that. So I'm actually quite optimistic that more and more people are realizing and waking up, because if I look at my generation, who's representative for this separation, at the same time, at my age, a lot of people I meet nowadays who probably would have not thought about this 10 years ago are now more and more becoming aware of it and becoming active in the space, trying to add their help to bring us back to a more aligned way of living. And so I think there is a huge transformation going on at the moment. And yeah, you might call it spiritual. I would say it's really not just looking for the answers out there, but also looking for the answers inside of us.
And how does this connect? You've done a lot of thinking, a lot of work on the soil.
Yeah.
How is soil connected to this spiritual crisis? Is the soil a metaphor for our spiritual poverty, or is it literally bound up? Have we lost touch with the world? We've done many shows over the years on the impact of global warming and the climate crisis on our psychologies, on our way of thinking, on our way of being.
Well, for me, the epiphany moment was when I really understood not only how important the soil is for everything living, at least on the land, but the same principles that apply to the soil to a certain extent also apply to the oceans. The fact that we, by mishandling the principles of life, by creating monocultures, by applying a lot of chemical inputs to the agricultural system, and by forcing nature into a monoculture approach, that soils have been significantly destroyed. We lost most likely 50% of the soil carbon in the soil, and soil carbon is basically correlates directly with fertility, and the fact that our soils are so depleted means that the soil life has been heavily affected, and which we call the biome of the soil, and this biome in the soil is very much related to our biome, as all the biome research is showing. So there is a direct connection between soil health and animal and human health and plant health. And so for me, to to start with the soil became kind of synonymous with the kind of change we need. And I created the kind of claim we have to think our economy from the soil up. And I learned that from farmers who are working in a regenerative way, which for me means that they are trying to maximize diversity on the land, going away from the monoculture approach, bringing back all living species because all of them are in a symbiotic relationship. So not just having farms who just do crops like wheat or maize or any of those, but bringing the animals back into the system as they play a major role in keeping our soils fertile and so on and so forth. And so the big surprise for me was that you can actually regenerate soils in a much faster way than I had expected. And so that's where I saw the solution. And our still very extractive economic system is extractive because we are not aware of the full cost of the system, as our accounting system only accounts for the costs that really happen in the company, but are not looking at the costs that a certain business might cause on the outside, in the environment. The environment has been considered to be something we just take from, and has not been considered to be something where the principle of giving and receiving applies. And I think this is really the core of the transformation that we are going through. We need to understand that everything is about giving and receiving. And so we have to rebuild the soils, we have to rebuild the ecosystems, we have to basically create an economy that strives on regenerating nature. And
what are you doing at Regenerate Forum, Jan, around Lake Constance? I know that this is a focus now of your work. Perhaps you might introduce our viewers and listeners to the work you're doing on Lake Constance.
Yeah. We came to the conclusion that if transforming the system doesn't work if you start at the national level. It doesn't even work on the state level. The hypothesis was that it might work on a regional level, because I think as much as we need top-down regulation, I think this transformation will happen bottom-up. And this transformation will only take place if people come together and jointly decide that they want really this kind of transformation. So through, let's say, serendipity, difficult now to put this in a few words, we ended up in a beautiful area of Germany at Lake Constance, the largest lake in Germany. And we're partnering with the family that gave the name to the whole state, who are residing there, and they have one of the largest farms and forests in the area. And the idea is really to transform what in the US you would call a county into a regenerative, connected landscape, which we call a climate landscape. And why do we call it a climate landscape? Because if you regenerate nature, if you apply regenerative methods in farming and forestry and how you treat the rivers and the waters, that you actually revive also the water cycle, which in most of the areas on the planet has been harmed as well, which is the natural way of nature basically transpiring and thereby creating clouds and precipitation. All this has been disturbed through a lot of the interventions we took into the nature. And so the way we approach this whole project, and I have to clearly say, to transform a whole region will take 10, 20 years. It, in the end, will only work if the local population gets on board and wants this. Requires a certain approach, and the approach that we developed is a 5-prong approach with 5 areas of impact where we're working on. One is to really activate the population on a local level, even on a community level. So the county we are talking about has 23 communities. The second area is to teach and train the farmers back to reconnect them with the soil, which the current farming system has disconnected them from more and more. It's about helping them in the process through a kind of facilitation program, which we link to a certification process as well, which is a multi-year process of helping them to get to a more sustainable way of farming the land. It's about how to refinance this whole transformation, because you typically will go through a certain little J-curve that requires financial support for the farmers to really achieve this transformation. And finally, how can we help that more produce that is coming from the region is actually consumed in the region? Today, the same way as in the US, in Europe, a lot of produce, like vegetables, for example, comes from Italy and Spain. So there's the agricultural produce has become a commodity traded worldwide. And if you buy an apple from South Africa, it might have been in the logistic chain for many, many months. And you can imagine the nutrition value of these apples